of a Man is a treasure trove of untold stories, powerful lessons, and profound wisdom. Through authentic dialogues and insightful discussions, we aim to unlock these treasures, one story at a time. So, whether you're seeking guidance, inspiration, or simply a moment of reflection, you're in the right place. Get ready to be challenged, inspired, and transformed. And now, to guide you through this journey of discovery, please welcome your host, a visionary leader and a true catalyst for change, Dwayne Dwyer, but we affectionately know him as the Mindset Coach.
Good evening, everybody. Happy Friday evening, and welcome to this week's episode of the Hearts of Men podcast. We're your host for this evening's conversation. My name is Dwayne Dwyer, go by the Mindset Coach, and I'm joined by my panel of brothers. Up top with me, we got Garfield Martin himself, the Uncle Junior, also known as a consistency coach. Below him, we got Brother Tawami Gaddy, also known as the son of Timothy, or better yet, the available man. And up under me is my brother from another mother, Mr. Roland Walker, also known as Poor Man's Dr. Phil, or better yet, Mr. Shift Happens. Gentlemen, how are you doing on this beautiful Friday evening?
I'm good, man. Every time you say Mr. Shift Happens, I just chuckle a little bit.
Better than I should be. I'm all right.
I'm doing well.
There you go, man. I got it. Very good. I greatly appreciate that. I'm good as well, man. As always, look forward to spending time with you guys and conversation and just enlightening. Looking forward to listening to what you guys have to say and bring to the table. And likewise, when it comes down to that, we always, and I think I can speak for you, gentlemen, when I say this, we always look forward to what the livest chat on social media has to say. So that being said, as always, we like to acknowledge you guys by name. So Michelle Ray, good to see you. Nick D, welcome. The Journey, good to see you as well. Let's see who else. Miss Crystal Everett, good to see you. N. Ellis, good to see you and welcome to the show. Miss Verly McCoy, aka Queen V, good to see you and welcome to the show. Miss Bernadette Simmons, as always, good to see you and welcome to the show. Miss Adrian Artist, good to see you and thank you for those enlightening responses to the shorts as well. I greatly appreciate that. And as always, good to see you. Welcome to the show. Miss Lisa Keys, good to see you. Welcome to the show. And for anybody else out there, whether you're on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, it doesn't really matter. If you don't mind getting the chat and just say hello, that way we can acknowledge you, because we like to do so by name on this platform, because we don't do a lot of that too much in our community. But here we want to appreciate you and give you your flowers right now so you can enjoy them. So that said, I want to make sure we get all of the admin stuff out of the way, because again, we this is a very enlightening conversation, and I want to make sure that we get after this as a continuation as we did last week. So is there anything I need to be bringing to the table, gentlemen? Anything I need to announce real quick before we get started? No?
I'm good to go.
Okay, so Roland got a confused. Okay, you good to go, bro? We got anything we got to talk about real quick before we get started? Okay, just wanted to make sure. He looking all full today. I'm just saying. All right, so that being said, have you ever wondered why communication is challenging in many marriages, especially when one partner is often silent? This question is especially pertinent in the Black community, where cultural stereotypes can hinder open dialogue. Welcome back to part 2 of this series, Why the Strong Silent Type is a Lie. In part 1, we explored the origins and impacts of this myth. Today, we'll dive deeper into bring greater awareness to this understanding. I've often been asked, why are men silent? This question will guide us as we examine cultural roots and the psychological impact of suppressed emotions and the role of vulnerability. We aim to challenge conventional wisdom and redefine true strength, creating a space where Black men's voice are valued. Check the show notes for a free download to support your journey towards deeper awareness. Join us as we unmask the myths and reveal empowering truths about the strong silent type. So that said, let's dive in. Yeah, like green, stop that. All right, so so I want to kind of start off real quick. First and foremost, because this is the empowering perspective community, I want to make sure that I acknowledge everybody on this platform, everybody in the chats, whatever the case may be. Everybody's point of view is valued. We believe that we are subject matter experts of our own perspective, and that way we value whatever anybody says. So all questions are welcome, all perspective are welcome, and I want to make sure I acknowledge that as we get started. So we had a good conversation last week, and I think everybody walked away from it, just feeling like we got a chance to say some things. But as we get started, I really want to ask a question to you guys, and just be open and transparent when it comes down to it. What do you want our listeners to take away from why the strong silent type is a lie, from parts one and from this conversation tonight?
I'll start by I I thought about saying breaking stereotypes, but I think that sometimes we have something that's considered a stereotype, and it may actually be true, but we will automatically dismiss it because someone sees it as a stereotype. So we'll just be like, oh, it's a stereotype. So I think what I would say is what you can take away from, last week, and what we're going to talk about is digging deeper into some of the stereotypes. Why is a certain thing a stereotype? When we're talking about the strong black man, or I mean the silent strong man and stuff like that, and holding things in, you know, like we talked about. And I think it's, like I think I mentioned last week, there are some things that I think we should hold in. And I think there are certain things that we should be selective about who we tell and who we share with. So I just, to kind of start off with, instead of necessarily breaking stereotypes, just maybe dig a little bit deeper into some of the stereotypes, and maybe unpack some of them a little bit more and see what you can find.
Okay, I like that. If you don't mind, just so that everybody can have a good idea of what you mean when you say stereotypes, not the word stereotype, but like give us an example of one of the stereotypes that you're talking about.
That men are controlling. All right. So that's a stereotype right there. So if if someone decides to put in boundaries within their home, it's not that they're being controlling, it's that they're being in control or of the situation. So it's a difference between controlling and just being in control of something. So I'm just speaking of, like, right now I am in control of my mouth. you know that's different than me being in control and telling coach, you are going to say this and this is not what you're going to say. So I think that, when people automatically assume that, when someone says that man is being controlling, I think sometimes it's not that he's being controlling, it's that he may have set up boundaries, and there are certain things that if he allows, it's going to cause second and third order effects, possibly negative, that could possibly affect everybody up underneath the household.
That's good. I like that one. I like that one. Okay, Roland Gaddy, what you got?
Um, so for me, it's like certain things that I'm not too sure if we'll get to, all right? Which is why I'm glad we started with this question, because I think when we're having the conversation of this silent, strong type, I think two things I think we have to notice is that some men, when we're silent, is because we don't want to act or speak off of our first emotional uh, reaction. We you know, and so sometimes I think that can be misunderstood with what we're talking about. Um, so some men do take it back a little bit so that we can collect everything that's going on before we respond, whether in action or in words, you know. But at the same time, when we talk about the silent type, I think some of the fears that I want, if there's any young men listening to this, and even, you know, women or mothers of young boys, is that it doesn't make you weak. I think the reason why we look at strong silent is because sometimes people think that it's a weak man who knows how to express himself, and that's a strength, to know how to articulate what you're actually feeling and not actually living and reacting in it. And so that's the difference between what men teach their boys. Sometimes when we tell them not to cry, we're not telling them not to have emotions. Sometimes we're telling them don't always act or live in it. So I think we should appreciate men who know how to speak and articulate exactly what they're feeling properly. And so I think that's where the strength actually lies.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because we're actually going to talk specifically about that here in a minute. So thank you for that. Oh man, what you got?
I think being the strong silent type and not speaking until you have something to say can be misconstrued sometimes. So I think that we shouldn't put those two in the same boat and make them the exact same thing, because just because you're talking doesn't mean you're not the strong silent type. Some people talk just because they want to talk, and then when there's something burdening them down, they hold it in. And one of your most powerful assets as a human being, as a man or a woman, is your voice. But it shouldn't just be used just to say anything. Sometimes the most appropriate thing to say is nothing. That doesn't make you the strong silent type. That means you know when to say something and when not to, when to make a gesture and when not to. I think during this conversation on last week and on this week, I'm sure we're going to cover it, but holding things in at times will make it to where it causes you undue stress, undue other physical and mental anguish, and it affects not just your body, but everyone around you. And it could have adverse effects to everything around you, and you could just, blow a cake.
I like that. I heard a while ago, I can't remember exactly where. It was something along the lines that a wise man speaks when he has something to say. But here's the challenge, right? Who determines who a wise man is?
Hmm.
So I think in the midst of, and this is just my point, in the midst of conversation, just like you want me to listen to whatever it is that you have to say, I kind of want you to listen to what I have to say as well. You want me to give credence and value to every word that you speak, not just the words itself, but from the position in which you're projecting it. Well, that's kind of like what men want as well. We want our words to be just as valuable. It's not that we're saying that our words should that our words should tower over you. And I think a lot of times when these conversations happen, that's what some people hear. Some people hear that we're trying to exert dominance. This has nothing to do with dominance. This has to do with bringing a community together so that we can unify and become one like the scriptures tell us to. So that's just kind of like my perspective when it kind of dives into it. And I think it kind of lines up with everything that you guys are talking about here right now. We had a very good conversation. I'm excited for everybody to get to see it. We kind of got deep into emotions here on Tuesday. And I think when it comes down to it, I think when that conversation comes out, a lot of people are going to learn some things about themselves. And one of the things that I asked, not just then, but now as well, when we're hearing things, don't think about somebody else. Think about self. Like, do I portray some of these things? Like, do I have any of these things in me? How have I done this in the past? And how am I actually doing this now? I think that's a great starting point when it comes down to these particular conversations, because everybody has a responsibility to manage this. This is my responsibility. This is the thing that I was put in charge of. And I was never put in charge to control anybody else. Going back to that point, I was never put in charge to control anybody else. I was put in a position to do a particular thing, and I am responsible to one person for that particular thing. Everybody else who's around me, they're the beneficiaries of my assumed responsibility and how well I do that thing. And if we all understand that, then we'll focus on me getting better, each person getting better at what they're charged with doing, what their responsibility is as well. So thank you guys for saying that. I'm looking at the chats. I greatly appreciate your responding to what the question that I asked, and I want to make sure that we get after those things as well. For those of you who say you're listening and learning, we greatly appreciate that. But just keep in mind that again, as I said in the beginning, your opinions and voice and questions are always welcome and valued. Okay. As you guys already know, go ahead and wherever you are, go ahead and hit the like button, whether you're on YouTube, Facebook, whether you're on Instagram, whether you're on LinkedIn, go ahead and hit the like button because the algorithm like it and we like it as well. And that's one of the ways that we know that we're adding value, because that's one of the things that we want to do. So moving forward into the next question, and I think we may spend a little time here. Men provide and protect, but at what cost? Oh, you got a question? I'm sorry. Go
ahead. I think it's more of an add to.
Okay.
And if I'm off, you guys let me know. But I think this is true too. I think that sometimes the strong silent can have different looks, right? So have you ever tried to have a conversation with somebody about something and they keep changing the subject? They never want to stick to it. They never want to talk about it, so they never get it out. So I think that sometimes silent can also be just not having the conversation or just not talking about something. There's an issue, it needs to happen. Instead of us talking about it, someone brings it up, and then someone keeps trying to change the subject, doesn't want to talk about it. So I think I just kind of want to add to, I think that is another way that sometimes people show silence.
Yeah. Communication gymnastics. Absolutely. Where you're talking about a particular thing and a person keep deflecting, or they keep sidestepping and moving on and trying to move the goalposts. Like, no, come on back, center mass. So yeah, I definitely agree with that. Okay. So the question that we have here, men provide and protect, but at what cost? How has this narrow definition of masculinity silenced men's emotional and perpetuated cycles of trauma within our community?
I thought so. I'm about
Pull
to
the
go.
plug, man. Pull the plug, man. Stop that. We done told you about that last week.
I think that sometimes we continue to use antiquated theories, antiquated behaviors, antiquated lifestyles. And what happens is we try to fit a 19th century man into a 21st century person. So provide and protect, that was when she didn't work. That was when she stayed at home with the kids. That was when you were out there sweating by your brow and this, that, and the other. But now there's more equality in workforce and so forth. So when it comes to the provide and protect, when you have that, when you try to stick to that 19th century mentality, what you do is fit yourself into a role, and you try to hold up societal expectations, which says it's the same way when you're with my grandmother. She would say, quit crying before I give you something to cry about. And then that meant I couldn't cry even when I felt pain. So I had to hold it in. I had to just make a noise on the inside. And that's how men are nowadays. They make noise on the inside where no one can hear them, and until they just happen to snap. So with those societal expectations of, well, this is all I'm good for, that means, like me, I like to sew. I like to do some things that we would consider feminine with the 19th century brain. But, and so in order for me to do that, I got to hide and do it. I got to hide and be myself. And that's one of those things where when you got to hide being who you are, eventually it'll come to a head and somebody's going to be hurt at the end of it.
Whew. I'm gonna take your statement as well, because you said it differently. I liked it, but I can't unhear it the way you said it now. But it's what was kind of in my head. We fit in the 19th, early 20th century man in with a 21st century woman. Not even just the 21st century, right? Because and the reason why I said it like that is because if we were all on board with behaving like we in the 1920s and earlier, then it could probably work, right? If you made enough money in today's society. But the problem is, I think we accept the 21st century woman, but try to create an archaic man. You get what I'm saying? So where I find the problem with that is a lot of because the 21st century woman is different. It doesn't match with the 20th and 19th century man, because now the man, it feels unvalued when he has an opinion, because all she expects of him is to provide, protect, but then there's no space for him to speak, because we know in the 21st century, you take the kids to the doctor, who's going to be the one speaking? Mama. You go to the store, who's going to be the one saying what we getting? Mama. And right, wrong, and differ, but it's the idea that we fold always to the voice of the woman. So what happens is the man's voice becomes unvalued. Only thing that you're valued for, and it's become is one of the things. Like I don't like the arguments on social media, but is one of the points I hear a lot of people argue, is that a lot of times, and I'm not talking about just the women in our chat, but just period. A lot of times, men are only appreciated for what he brings into the house, and after that, you're really in her way. You're really in her way. It's the woman who makes the home. It's the woman who creates the environment. It's the woman who turns the house into the home. Why not the family turn the house into the home? You get so these narratives that are created and that are taught to our generation have a lot of men, especially in the generations coming up. This is the struggles that they're fighting against. They're trying to create a new narrative so that they have a voice. But we can't, so that, to me, that's where it kind of stifles us in our growth.
I've said a lot already. There's still a lot to chew on. It's a really big question. If you're just looking at, the men providing protection, let's look at what providing means, right? And a lot of time when people look at this, they assume that provide means 100%, right? And maybe it does to some, and maybe it doesn't. Whatever it is your definition of provide is, for most people, it seems like a heavy lift for someone to do. When you're saying that you have to provide for this family, let's say for instance, it's a dad, it's a mom, and it's 3 kids. You have to provide for everybody. That means you are solely responsible for everybody in that house. It's a huge responsibility. Now, when it comes to protecting, you are responsible for protecting everybody in the house. That is another huge responsibility. Those are 2 great lifts that we ask men to do right here. I'm just speaking just from the provide and protect portion of this question. And at what cost? Look at what it costs. Like, that is a huge responsibility. Like, just think about that. Think about, we talk, people talk about single mothers. Think about that. Now think about how hard that is as a single mother. Like, it's hard. You have to do everything yourself. That's a lot of responsibility. you know what I mean, to having to do some of these things. But back to the men, this is a huge lift for anybody. So what happens in a lot of cases is you're not allowed to be vulnerable or to be weak, and you have to hold things in, because if I'm looking at somebody to provide, if you're looking at a lion as a provider, we don't look at lions as being weak. We don't look at them as being weak, and the ones that show weakness, they usually get rid of them, at some point. So the same thing goes for us. I think sometimes men can experience a lot of trauma trying to live up to being a provider and a protector. And then sometimes it backfires because there's not an outlet, or for whatever reason. And now maybe the guy's holding things in, or for whatever. But I think it can eventually be called self-harm, and physically and mentally, to whereas you're not there physically for the community or for your family, or you're not there mentally for your family or community as well. So I think, what does it cost? It's, if you're not strong enough, or I don't mean that likely at all, but I'm just saying that because I don't have another word, another phrase to throw in there right now. But if you're not strong enough to take on this responsibility of being a provider and a protector, it can lead to a lot of trauma within your community and within yourself.
Yeah, I greatly appreciate everybody's point of view, because they're valid. I made a social media post earlier this week, and it kind of included this phrase. And I asked, and it was a question. It went along, and it was a question that was asked in there. Um, when we look at the notion of men provide and protect, based upon whose perspective of what provision and protection look like. And so I think a lot of times it becomes problematic to where this man may have an idea what that looks like, but then this woman comes into the picture and she has a different idea of what that looks like. And a lot of times it's like a lot of time the provision only equates to, like Gaddy said, what they bring in the house. The protection is what they do on the perimeter of the house. But why can't they provide not just what they bring in the house, but what they provide in the house as well? I'm just talking provision alone, because within the scope of understanding who he is and who he is becoming, his provision expands. When the scope of protection, that protection expands. So it's not just providing resources as money or whatever that looks like. It's providing an identity for those children as well. It is also providing the image of what marriage looks like, if we're talking about that. And because there is no coming together to become one flesh without the entirety of that man. So if you reduce him down to just providing and protecting based upon what my thoughts of what providing and protecting look like, now what ends up happening is that you do not allow him to come into the fullness of his own identity. Not just his own identity as a man, but his own identity as a husband, his own identity as a father. And a lot of times what ends up happening is that based upon the continuation of conversation, that man will choose silence over, and I hate to say standing his ground, but actually trying to help you understand what the entirety of provision and protection look like. Now, we look at the cost of what that looks like. Now, what do you give up so that you can fall in line with that particular narrative that is being projected on you? You give up this internal peace that you're trying to find because you're trying to step into your identity. You're trying to step into your calling, who you're called to be by the Most High. And if I can't understand, not just through conceptual notions, but practicality, if I can't practice what my understanding of what manhood is all about according to the Most High, and we just limit it down to provision and protection based upon resources and having a firearm in the house to protect everybody that's in the house, and I just leave it at that, then that man gets to the point to where there is some degree of a split personality. Think about it. Go outside, catch up with your fellas and things of that nature, and you're listening to everybody talk about, the things that they get to do within their house. And I'm not talking about anything outlandish. I'm just talking about who they're allowed to be. And this man who only gets to provide and protect, is listening to how Garfield is as a husband, listening to how Roland is as a husband, listening to how Gaddy is as a husband. Like, man, I don't get to do none of that because in my house, I'm only reduced to, like Gaddy said, what I bring in the house and what I do for the house. That is all. And so what ends up happening is from an emotional standpoint, and I just kind of let the cat out of the bag, Garfield. From an emotional standpoint, right? From my subjective understanding of what the concept of who I am, and then the physiological response, which then turns into a behavioral response. That's where a lot of the problems that we see in marriage come from. I digress and give because you itching, boy. Go ahead, man.
Who me or Gaddy?
Yeah, they itching, man. Look.
Hey, I am too. Go ahead, Gaddy.
Because you said something that I think has to be addressed on the fix it side, right? Is because there's a level of me being a man that, as a woman, I don't expect you nor want you to understand. I just need you to support and give that space. Because there's a level of being a woman that you can't expect me to understand. I have to understand to the level of how do I allow you to be that and grow in that. How do I support that? And so instead of sometimes trying to tell me because I think we get caught up in this, my expectation of a woman, my expectation of a man, so much that it chokes our ability to naturally be when you talk about being who the Most High called us to be. I don't need you to understand what the Most High called me to be. It ain't your job to understand that. It ain't my job to understand what the Most High asks you to be as a woman outside of the perimeters of what we see written black and white, right? We can throw scripture at each other, but there's something in that was put in you as a woman, something that was put in me as a man to be for the Most High. That all I need from you is support. Sometimes we said, we like to sing, was the SWV? All I need from you is understand. No, I don't. Support. That's what I need from you. Respect what the Most High is doing in me, and support to create an environment in you that I can flourish in that, and vice versa.
So this question started off with men provide and protect. So I I kind of have a follow-on question or thought after this. And my question is to you guys. Do you guys, in general, generally speaking, do you generally speaking, think men want to provide and protect?
I think we provide and protect one for another, because there's some things that I may see being a man, how women move, but she sees the conniving side of them, where I'm thinking, oh, she's just being nice, just like us. And they'll take it as jealousy or something like that when we say, nah, that Negro trying to slide up to you. We trying to tell you, I know how it looks because I've done it. I've been there. I'm not jealous. I'm not thinking he gonna take you, but I know the manipulation tactics of a man because I'm one. So sometimes it's her position to protect me from myself and my naivety, because I may just think, oh, they just being nice. And next thing you know, she done slid in close and trying to warm the fire. And that ain't what we're trying to do. So I think that the protection piece goes both ways. Now, physically, I don't know who you with, unless you're with Big Shirley or somebody like that. But I'm the protector. I hold peace. Pieces all over the house. But that's the peace that surpasses all understanding. So I protect this in that arena. But there's some things that the other side may protect. She protects from, she sees some things that I don't, because you know how it is. A man to be happy in the house if he got a PlayStation and a futon, and he good to go. He may have an air fryer or something like that, but we good. But that's not conducive to family living, because we think, okay, bare necessities sometimes, while the other side may say, no, this makes it feel warm. So I think it's a combination of.
Can you ask it again? My bad.
I said, do you think in general men want to provide and protect?
Oh, easy answer to me. To me. Now this is to Gaddy. Yes. Right? Is that all I want to do? No. But is that what I want to do? I tell people, like, a lot of women get it messed up, right? When you start making my income an obligation to your availability, right? Even from the start, before you even got my last name, you what's in my pocket. You automatically turn me off. But the problem with that is, as a husband, I enjoy watching my kids run through the house sucking up AC because I know I paid for that. I love when they unlock the door because I know I was able to put that roof over my family's head. I like those things make me actually bring joy to me as a man. When I open up the fridge and I look and I'm like, man, God has allowed me to put food in my kids' mouth. Like that's something that I'm able to do, and I can actually tangibly, I can see it, And so there is a joy behind that. When my kids are just like when you teach your kid how to do something, and you get joy when you see them learn how to do it, and you see them doing it on their own. That's that. So there's a joy to provide. There's a joy to protect them. To know that I can protect, right? Because that's the base level man. And I hate to say it like that, but that's the minimum of what we do. That's not the extent, but that to know that I can achieve at right here, and now I can grow from there. So yes.
I got to smile before I speak. Because I can appreciate everything y'all brothers are saying, and I don't disagree with you. But I'm gonna say the thing y'all don't want to say. Protection comes at a cost. You do not go to the airport and take a flight and go in there with 15 bags. It's just not gonna happen. They're gonna tell you you got one carry-on bag and you get one check bag. That's it. That's it. So I think a lot of times, and I'm agreeing, and I want to make sure that I'm clear. I'm agreeing 100% with what you are saying. I'm agreeing. Both protect, both men and women protect. But the question is what? I think too many times people are focused on protecting their ego. And because they're focused on protecting their ego, I don't want to lose who I am in the midst of this relationship, situationship, or whatever type of ship you're on, right? But here's the reality of the truth. Whoever you think you are today, you're not that person tomorrow. Life is going to happen to you. So you are changing incrementally throughout time. Do I think men want to protect? Yes. Do I think men want to provide? Yes. Do I think women want to protect? Yes. Do I think women want to provide? Yes. But the problem that I'm seeing is that they want to protect and provide under their own parameters. That becomes problematic. I don't get to go to Delta and tell them what I want to do on their aircraft. So at the end of the day, when it comes down to your question, you're absolutely 100%. To what Roland and Gaddy say, absolutely 100%. But there's this thing called sacrifice. And sacrifice is a thing that you give up, something that you give up for a greater good, something small that you give up for a greater good. The problem is most of us, and I'm just saying us in general, men and women both, no one is exempt from this explanation. The problem is that we don't want to give up that little thing for the greater good. We want to take the little thing with us and think it's supposed to work. It doesn't work that way. So when it comes down to providing and protecting, absolutely, both men and women want to provide in relationship. But the issue is at what cost? And if you're believing the cost is nothing, well, you get what you pay for.
Yeah. I appreciate all y'all responses. I really liked all of them. I think that in general, men want to provide and protect too. But at this, however, or in addition to, it's like with anything, you don't want a bunch of crap. You know what I'm saying? Like with anything, like if we're a boss on our job, how can I say? Because I don't want to make it seem like it's a hierarchy, but it is. And I didn't create the hierarchy. You know what I mean? If you don't like it, you go look at your directions. So I don't know, but I kind of appreciate everything you guys said. But I was also looking at the question. It was like, the trauma, and it's like, well, if men generally want to provide and protect, then what's the problem? You know what I mean? Like, why is there an issue if men in general, this is what we want to do? Like, we want to provide, we want to protect, but we want to provide and protect the right people. We want to provide and protect the people that are willing to be provided for, when we was in the military. You know what I mean? If coach is in charge, he's the boss, he's a platoon sergeant, and the other three of us are squad leaders. You know what I mean? Coach like, look, everybody need to do X, Y, and Z. Well, we go out and just execute. You know what I mean? And it's a whole lot easier. We report back and keep it moving. If it's something ain't right, then he'll let us know too. But I don't know. I really think that men generally do just want to provide and protect, but I don't see why there's such a big problem if this is what we want to do anyway. But I think it may be, I listened to what Gaddy said, and then something you said earlier, Coach, being the only thing. You know what I mean? It's like it's more to men than just providing and protecting. It's a lot more to us than just that.
But even on the surface of that, I need your cooperation in order to protect you, and I think that's what Coach is trying to point out. All right, it's and Adrian knows I love her. That's my girl. That's my homie. But when she said we love our independence, but we want our men to protect us, well, sometimes it comes to the cost of what you call your independence, because what you can't do is go outside and start mouthing off at somebody, then look at me talking about protect. Nah, Shawty, you got yourself into that fight. Nah, I'm being funny, but that's the premise we have put on men. I'm gonna go out here and I'm gonna fight with this man because he needs to watch his mouth. Did he disrespect you? Yes. Does that mean that you start a hostile situation with him because you know that I'm gonna come behind? No. Do I have a gun? Yes. Do I want to know what it felt like to shoot another brother because he about to hit my wife or my girl or whatever? No. I don't want to know what that feels like. And so I need your cooperation. Just like I tell young men, every fight ain't got. I want you to come home more than I want you to prove you tough. And I don't want you to put me in a situation so I might have to fight Ray and his three cousins because you want to go back and forth. And so that's where that cost come in. Okay, if I tell you, baby, I don't want you dressed like that, the way you shape, that ain't gonna work well for me. Well, I could wear what I want to wear. If they out there looking at me, that's their fault. Yeah, but you expect me to punch him in his eye if he stares too hard or if he grabs you. You're not protecting me. You're putting me in harm's way. I'm gonna let my brother go. I see him.
I don't know. I like what you're saying, Gaddy. You said some things comically, but they were on point. And I think that it's a team aspect, and you see it on the family as a team. Period. So you see it when Randy Moss, who I think is the best wide receiver ever, was playing with the Oakland Raiders. I don't know if they say Oakland, LA, whatever, Raiders. He was a horrible teammate. The offensive line protected the quarterback. The running back sometimes protected and got passes or runs. But he would only play when the call was directed towards him. So it was all about his ego. And that's how sometimes we are, male and female. It's about my ego. Well, I provided the food. You should cook it. You got to do this. And then she's saying, well, you ain't provided enough or you ain't doing this. Because of her comfort level or his comfort level. It's not about you being comfortable. It's about whether or not the team is moving forward in a proper manner. Because sometimes we will do things and say things to disrespect one another, to degrade one another, and expect, oh, well, I did my part. No, because apparently if that person is not in a position to do theirs, that means that somewhere along the line, we didn't communicate properly to where this thing is actually a team, and we're protecting the house. We're protecting the family. And I'm not just like, because if you come to my house, I got Sam's in my garage. So I got stockpiles of toilet paper, soap, you name it, I got it in there. So the grandkids come, they don't know what it's like to not have it, but they know it's there because I put it there. But I don't got to go around saying, well, hey, grandpa, make it happen because I put some doggone toilet paper in the garage and paper towels. No, they got to see me in other facets of being a man, where it's not just beating my chest about things. I got to be the teacher. I got to be the consoler. I got to be the nurturer at times. So it's a team aspect.
Yeah, I'm loving all these responses, and you know, I like to. I do agree with the team assertion, but I also say it's a brand. It's like you see Apple. It doesn't matter what Apple put out. You see that Apple on it, you're expecting it to be good. And I think that's kind of like what the relationship is supposed to be. It's a brand. It ain't about you, boo. That's the thing. It ain't about me. It is about, it is about, yeah, we see we got your Apple, bro. It is about the brand that we represent. And if I am trying to be the most important person in the brand, now what we're getting ready to do is tarnish the brand. And so the more I make it about me, the more I make things center around me, now that brand becomes toxic, that brand becomes tarnished. And then people within the scope of that brand, they start to see different things. And then this person gets alienated, so forth and so on. So to your point, I'm just going back and rehashing. You know, I do believe that men want to provide and protect. I agree. But the thing is, they're coming into an understanding of what that provision looks like. What does that protection look like? In the beginning, it may be resources because that's what they know. But as time progresses, it transitions from resources to giving more of themselves. Going back to Gaddy's point, that protection means that you don't put me in a situation to where I have to do something that causes the entire brand to lose one of its key players. Because if I have to respond to a individual that doesn't respect the brand, now I got to deal with law enforcement. And when law enforcement come and pick me up and take me away, now what? Who's going to provide and protect now? So it becomes problematic overall. So thank you for that question, Garfield. I thought it was a great question. And again, thank you everybody for your responses. Loving what you guys say in the chats. Keep them coming. Greatly appreciate your feedback. Loving what you said there, Queen V, and you're absolutely correct. Again, wherever you are, greatly appreciate you joining us this evening. So wherever you are, go ahead and hit the like button. And again, you know, we appreciate that as well. So getting to the cultural roots of silent men, because you got to realize it's not that we came out the womb that way. So we got to realize that it started someplace. So the question that I want to ask you guys, in what ways do family dynamics and upbringing influence a man's tendency to adopt the strong, silent type persona?
I think sometimes these things can be modeled. I think sometimes young men see certain behaviors from dad at home. If there's assume that there's a dad in the home, a lot of times we pick up, some of those habits of our father. And just like we probably pick up habits of our mom, all kids pick up habits from both. But I think sometimes because sometimes I think, if you're a man, if you're a father, right, we don't share, the bills being overdue and the mortgage being late and the phone bill, the water about to get cut off. Like, we don't share these things with our kids, especially when they're very, very young, so they don't necessarily know and see us growing up and understand the sometimes the drama or the trauma and all of the things that may go on in the house, especially when it comes to finances or especially when it comes to having or not having certain conversations. So I think that just by virtue or by default of men not sharing certain things with their kids, because not that it ain't their business, is that, what do kids need to know that, the mortgage is late, like they can't do anything about it. You know what I mean? So I think that sometimes we just not hold things in, but we just don't share certain things with our kids. And sometimes as kids, we can assume that when we growing up, that dad is just being silent about certain things. And we look back, it's like, man, dad didn't talk about nothing. Dad probably shared a bunch of stuff, but dad didn't want to share all the negative stuff and all the bad stuff that's going on at his job into his house, because he had to be a provider and a protector, and he had to have a good aura and all of this stuff inside the house. So
Well, I think I was raised in a house full of women. So I knew how to be a man from people on TV. I knew how to be a man from people in the street, but those weren't the men that I would want my daughters or my sisters to be with. Those weren't, so I knew certain things, but until I saw it modeled, I didn't know a thing. So now there's some things that I do, like I've personally seen majority of my grandchildren born because my daughters wanted me in the room because of the close bond that we had. But men would always say, you just supposed to wait in the waiting room. Why? Because that's how manhood was relayed to you. That's how your relationship is with your children. But the dynamics of bringing influence on a man's tendencies, I think when you're around the female persuasion more than you are male, and you develop those tendencies. And people always think that it's he walking around switching. That's not the case. It may be the man that is always belittling and belligerent to women. He has female tendencies because he does not know how to control his emotions, to the fact that where he can talk about things, he has to try to assert himself physically because he know I'm physically dominant over you. It's things like that which you can see how a male has not been brought into manhood, but he's just an adult male.
I honestly share not in between, but on both sides of both of those arguments or perspectives, because I would say on one hand, I had more women in my house than men, right? Especially when my mother and my father separated. So I didn't see in home what it looked like for a man to speak. All I knew were women's perspectives, and all I knew how to listen to were the women's perspectives. And so when I became a young man, I felt as if, and I had an anger management issue as a young man, but I understand now part of it was I was frustrated because I felt like I had to force my opinion out there, or I had to fight to get my voice heard because I was a boy. Didn't nobody want to hear what we had to say? Because I never heard a man speak or and even when they were in the house, when my mother and my father were together, kind of like what Uncle was saying, was when they had issues, they talked about it behind closed doors. My mother was the executor. My mother was the one that did this, that did that. My father went to work. He worked late night shifts. So when he would come home, half the time he would sleep, you know. And so when he did express himself or what he wanted or what he wanted in the house to be done, that happened behind closed doors. It's that mantra that we used to always hear, grown folks in here talking. So you never heard the man speak. He was in silence. But you knew but sometimes you could tell that daddy said something because mama used to be like, do this before your daddy get home. Get this done before your daddy get home. But you never actually saw what bothered that until he pulled the blood out. And so the only sign of a father that I knew young before they separated was the discipline. So as a man, kind of like what Rose said, I had to learn some things from some grown men in the army, and not all of it was good. And some of it I had to figure out. Some of it I actually had to learn scripture. I had to learn words to actually start molding myself towards something other than what I was taught to be. Because even some of the men in the church, what they would teach me were how to work with my hand and how to run women. The dudes on the street was teaching me how to hustle and how to run women. Like, that was the end all be. It's like that was the commonality, but we had to learn some other things as we became men. And by that time, it's almost as if, well, not almost as if, it's that point when you become a man that to where you're really part of your silence is because you're figuring out how to express yourself. You're figuring out what it looks like, not to be seen, because you don't want to be seen as the controlling type. You don't want to be seen as the hyper masculine type, but you still want to be heard.
I'm a firm believer in, and obviously this is not a blanket statement for everybody, but I'm a firm believer that people who don't know how to be in good relationships struggle with teaching how to be in good relationships. That's just what I believe. Again, that's not a blanket statement for everybody. There are some people who took the opportunity to learn from their mistakes, and then the things that they learned, they actually instilled it in their children. That said, when you look at a community to where the notion of relationship has deteriorated for years on top of years moving forward, then what you end up seeing is that, well, you have a lot of boys being raised without their fathers in the home. It's not the boy's fault, right? It's just a simple fact to them. So that mother doing the best that she possibly can, but really can't teach that young man how to be a man. She can teach that young man how to be a good person, a decent human being, just can't teach him how to be a man. Now, let me talk about this guy real quick, because for me, that was, and you guys heard me talk about the Uncle Brigade before. I greatly appreciate those young men because I had one of them, my Uncle Mike. My Uncle Mike would come home, and of course, I was always happy to see my Uncle Mike, but every now and then, he'll grab me, throw me in the bed, and give me the business. And, I'm looking at Mama, help, Mama, help, get him off me. And she was like, nope, I'm just going to let it happen. Here's the best part about it. I didn't realize what he was doing until later. Later on, it dawned on me that he seen something in me that he didn't like as a man. And so when he was doing that, in his mind, he was trying to toughen me up. Right, wrong, or indifferent. Reserve the judgment on that. But look at the notion of what this grown man seen in his nephew. And he said, sis, I'm going to let you know, I'm not going to let him grow up to be an effeminate man. I understand. I'm not trying to get in the way of you teaching him or anything of that nature, but I just want to toughen him up a little bit. And she was like, have at it. I greatly appreciate that. Let me be honest with you. Now, am I saying that's the right thing to do? I'm not saying that that's the right thing to do. I'm just saying I appreciated it. Because at the end of the day, when you look at this particular question, bring it back up, please. When you look at this particular question, you have to understand in a child's formative years, that's where a lot of their foundational understanding of how to be comes from. And so the unfortunate side of that is my mom's perception of men may not have necessarily been what the reality of what men are supposed to be came to be, right? So being involved with somebody who is young, being involved with somebody who is still trying to learn who they are, figure out life, trying to fit into the mode of manhood, kind of like what we talked to, move from provision and protection from the standpoint of resource to the standpoint of provision and protection from the standpoint of it being more than just resource. It becomes their total being on how they show up and how they're there for their families, things of that nature. It is a very daunting task for that woman to teach that young boy how to be a man. And so in essence, am I saying that she is responsible? I'm not putting responsibility on blame. The only thing I'm doing is showing a notion, an idea, or a concept that says that when you look at the plight of these young men growing up, if they don't have if they don't have a older man, a Uncle Mike, right? If they don't have a senior male in their life that says, you know what, I will step up and I will be a part of that boy's masculine development, then that young man may suffer and he may end up with some of those anger issues that Gaddy touched on. And I agree with that 100% because there was a small point in time where I was extremely angry, right? Only because of something later on that added to all of this. Not so much of the fact that I didn't have my dad and things of that nature. It was just that there was some anger in me that I had to learn how to root out. Once I figured that part out, then that's when I started opening my eyes and realized, hey, wait, hold up. I'm not just a provider and a protector. It's a whole lot deeper than that. So that's just kind of like my response to this. Any other comments on this one? Because Garfield, I think you have a question to what you mentioned earlier, bro. Nope. Everybody good? All right. Can you?
I'm good. I'm ready. Ready.
Could you bring up that question, please? The what if? There you go. What if a person is controlling due to the fact they are trying to protect their masculinity, which leads to anger, anxiety, which opens the door to control someone else?
That's the opposite of masculinity. Because masculinity just is. It doesn't, you don't have to conjure it up. You don't have to make it anything. You don't have to get loud. You don't have to be belligerent. But because you don't know how to be, you do what you perceive it to be. So when a person has to, oh, I got to show you. It's just like when we were in the military. If another E7 came up and said, First Sergeant said, we got to, like, what? First Sergeant said, you can't do it off your own merit, off your own rank. You got to throw his rank on there because you aren't comfortable with leadership. And that was a problem then. That's a problem with manhood. That's a problem with people not being in positions, not knowing how to articulate themselves and not know how to be. You should just be able to say what you feel, mean what you say, and say what you mean.
To Verlene McCoy's statement here, the first part of this says, what if a person is controlling? That's it right there. I don't need to say anything else. If that person is controlling, that's a problem. That's the only response I have.
I like that. I'm a piggyback everything that Unc just said, that exact statement. But behind that, I'm just gonna say that if a man's masculinity is, if he feels it's threatened, a man is not going to react with being controlling or aggressive or physical. He's probably going to turn into the myth that we're talking about right now. He's going to shut it down, and you're not going to be able to get nothing from him. Then you're going to be mad at him because he's not talking, because you're not emotionally available and all. But you can't shut down who he is. You can't attack his masculinity. You can't attack his emotions every time he speaks, and then get mad that he became silent. That shutdown is probably emotionally the most dangerous time of a man in his relationship. When he shuts down, he disconnects, because it takes a lot for us to disconnect, because we feel like it's our responsibility. The livelihood, the protection, the teaching, the leading, the provision, a lot of this is our responsibility. At least to us, we believe. I don't know if everybody believes that, but so when he shuts down and disconnects from that's a dark place. That's a real dark place to be. And so I'll always, and I don't like blames, right? Because a part of me wants to be like, well, what is going on that his masculinity is being threatened? But I would say if he reacts like this, he probably threatened his own masculinity, probably his own subconsciousness that caused him to get in a situation to where you didn't trust him. So yeah, I think there's a lot that unravels with this question.
I just want to be heard. I'm gonna start off by saying that because, and I'm doing that for a reason. When a person tells me, and I'm gonna respond to this question as though this question was asked to me as a coach. When a person says, I just want to be heard, I ask them exactly what does that mean? Because if they say that to me, a lot of times what we do is we take that as fact. And there's a big difference between fact, assumptions, and opinions. And so I like to start at the beginning and then work my way to the end. Garfield, you asked a great question. Oh, and I'm sorry, you didn't ask a question. You made a great statement in the chat just now. There is a difference between being in control and controlling. So my first question would be, why would you say that this person is being controlling? Because I want to understand, is it controlling or is it that this person just decided, like you said at the beginning? That's why I said this is a question for you, right? I want to understand, is it a boundary or is it them being controlling? Because if we can understand that, then everything else is not even a conversation piece. Okay. Maybe it's, and again, it's not against her. I'm just dissecting the question. Maybe it's the perception of control. Maybe it's the easy button control because I'm not getting my way. Right. So I always start there. Once we have that conversation about the perception of control, the understanding of control, and the facts that go along with behavior that says it is control, then we can talk about the other stuff, right? Because now I can look at the what if. But I am always leery when we start putting tags on people, right? I put a tag on Gaddy because he wears hats like that. Oh, the New York boys. You know what I'm saying? What does that really mean? You know what I'm saying? So it's like, yeah, they don't like to put, down south, we like to bend our hats like Garfield. That's what we do. Right? When them cats up north, they keep the bill straight, they turn it to the side, and they TI their way out the door. That's what's up. I'm okay with that. So understanding whether it is being controlling, which means a thing, or whether them having a boundary looks like control. And then once we can come to the understanding of that, whether it is or is not, then we can talk about due to the fact of them trying to protect their masculine. Okay, let's back up there. Trying to protect. Well, why do they feel like they need to protect? What are they threatened by? You see what I'm saying? When you start dissecting this question really asks, this question lays a whole lot to be understood. So I'm really leery about taking a statement or a question as face value a lot of times in the midst of a coaching session. And again, I do it in a way to where they don't feel threatened, but it really makes them think. Is this person controlling, or is it my perception of control? Maybe as we continue to go down the rabbit hole, maybe they seen something in their childhood years that they brought into their adult years. And now anything that looks like a duck, even though it might be a duck-billed platypus, it's a duck. No, that's a duck-billed platypus. No, that's a duck. Because my prior experience say that's a duck. No, it's a duck-billed platypus. Look at it. It's a whole different animal. So when we start dissecting things and asking particular questions and getting down to the root cause of why we first pin control and then went after the protect, right? Because again, if that person feels threatened, they're going to get into protection mode. That's a human function. Okay. So when we say protect their masculinity, did you try to emasculate them? That's the next question. Did you call them out his name? And you know what that name is. I don't have to say it, but it rhymes with witch. You see what I'm saying? Because I'm gonna tell you right now, you call me a witch, it's on. I'm just, I'm just being transparent. I'm not trying to offend anybody. I'm just saying that these questions, although it's a great question, we really got to think into the question and really unpack it so that we can understand, is it a behavior issue or is it a perception issue? If it's a perception issue, then we got to realize that perception comes through the lens of perspective. So what is your perspective based upon male behavior? Because when you back somebody in the corner, they're going to come out fighting. So maybe the problem is that he was backed in the corner and he decided to come out fighting instead of the fact that he just came around the corner all liquored up after work because he didn't spend half his check at the bar, and now he wants to exert his dominance. If the latter was the conversation, now let's get after this piece right here, because I really wanted to know, did this person show this type of behavior in the beginning, or was it something that was realized at a later point in time? Did you get into this marriage too early, or I'm just assuming it's a marriage? Did you get into this too early before you realize who the person is? And a lot of times that's what we do, right? We'll entertain a relationship. Then within 4 weeks, I was listening to something today, and that's kind of like what it was about. Within 4 weeks, you're married. 4 weeks. You don't even know that person. So I think a lot of times, and again, I'm not saying that this is you. Again, I love this question, but a lot of times that's what ends up happening. We get ourselves into a permanent situation without ever understanding the person that we get into the situation with. So again, great question, but there's a lot to unpack within the scope of this question.
Can I ask a question to the coaches and to the grandpa? So is there a different approach to this question if we're talking to the man?
Sure. But the different approach does not change dissecting the question. You see what I'm saying? Because when you start going back and looking at childhood, now you got to ask certain questions about the childhood. You know, how did your dad respond to your mom? How did your dad treat your mom? Things of that nature. Like, were you around? Like, so forth and so on. So approaches are different based upon people, not necessarily based upon sex. You see what I'm saying? And I think that's why it's called a coaching. Well, that's why it's called a coaching relationship. You're developing a relationship with that person. And so having a better understanding of that person, it kind of helps you to ask the best question for that person in that moment in time. Some things I can ask you directly because of how you portray yourself, like your aura. So your aura, your energy now says, okay, Gaddy can take a very direct question and I can hit you with the whys. Any question that begins with a why can be threatening to the wrong person. But if you have that very soft-spoken mouth, I'm probably not going to ask you the why. You know what I'm saying? I may ask you a different question, like a how question. A how question now gets you into the process of the thing. So when we start looking at certain things, it's not a sex thing that makes it different. It's more so of a personality thing that makes it different.
I get it. And the only reason why I asked sex-wise is because I'm thinking, how do I approach it if a man comes and says, I feel like my masculinity is being threatened? So what is the difference? Because I love the approach, but because I believe that there's a lot of layers to this question, but I believe different layers when we start talking about a man that feels like his masculinity is being threatened, because I think the underlying causes are sometimes different than the woman who feels like the man is becoming controlling, trying to protect his masculinity.
But see, that's a whole different question within itself, though, because notice what you did. You left the controlling piece off. And a lot of times, what you'll hear from men, and again, not 100% across the board, in most cases, men won't say things to make it sound as though their significant other is trying to control them, right? Because they don't want to give that perspective off. But they'll say that this person have control issues, right? So just like the question that you asked, I feel like my masculinity is being threatened. So that's a whole different conversation. So now my question would be to you, well, what makes you feel? Why do you feel like again, because why do you feel like your masculinity is being threatened? You just can't ask that question. I got to qualify that question first. And then when I get you to think into it, because again, it could just be the easy button. That's the easy button. So when I get you to think into it and you can articulate to me why you feel that way, then that gives me something more to go off of. And so that's why I say that. But I think that's a great question. Thank you for that one. Any other thoughts? All right, very good, very good. We're going to skip over the parenting style question because that may take a little to explain, and I think that should be a whole separate conversation by itself. Let's go into the role of vulnerability in genuine strength. Okay, and this again, you guys be on it, man. What are some common misconceptions?
Skipping a TV show question?
Yeah, I got to skip the TV show question for now. Bill Cosby's the devil. No, I'm joking. I'm joking. I like Bill Cosby. What are some common misconceptions about vulnerability that prevent men from expressing their true feelings?
Makes you look weak.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Now, I was just saying that I think the misconception is that vulnerability is a feminine trait. And maybe it comes from, somewhat of the suck it up, you're a man. I think that has its, or you're a boy. I think it has its place, but I think it can be too much at times, right? So I think because I don't think that young boys really know how to differentiate between, driving on and not showing emotion. I don't know if a young boy, 9-year-old, can differentiate that. So there got to be teaching behind it when we say it. It can't just be stop crying, stop crying, you're a boy, or I know I have big brothers who were Gen X like you were joking. So I know y'all probably said it to somebody, or stop crying like a little witch. You know what I'm saying? So you carry that crying and witch. You carry those two together as if they're synonyms of one another. You know what I'm saying? So when you get to the idea of being vulnerable, you can feel like I ain't finna come over here and cry like a little, So I think that is one of the things that have to be torn away from vulnerability. It takes strength to face a hard situation and express yourself and say how you feel, so that things can be addressed.
I think one of the misconceptions would be that being vulnerable is effeminate. It's a feminine trait. I think that being vulnerable, people have been vulnerable to the wrong people, and they think that they can be vulnerable to any and everybody that calls themselves their friend, their partner, their homie, when that's not the case. Someone has to show themselves worthy of you being vulnerable to them. You can't just be vulnerable to everybody and walk around crying and, oh, I need a hug and yada, yada. Nah, because somebody has to be able to lift your head and tell you that you can make it, not downgrade you and belittle you because you're showing emotion and showing that you have feelings and hurts. And that's when you can see that when you're vulnerable and somebody else takes that and manipulates it, that's one of those relationships that you can call toxic. I can't be in this relationship, not like this with you, because I can't trust myself with you. I can only give so much. Yes, sir.
I got a question. What do you mean when you manipulate vulnerability?
When you manipulate vulnerability, if you show me your feelings and I think that you're supposed to be a certain way, I'm going to tell you acting like a witch. I'm going to tell you men don't cry. I'm going to tell you that's not what we do. Not allow you to feel. So I take away the validation of your feelings and say you're wrong for feeling like that. Don't do it again. So now I've manipulated how you feel about that situation. And now you won't not feel it, but you won't show it.
One common misconception. Go ahead.
It was a question to Ro. Because I don't disagree, nor agree with vulnerability is a feminine trait. Would you say that it's how you show it because I think the femininity comes with.
It's a human trait. I think it's a human trait.
Oh, okay. I think you said.
Right.
He said effeminate.
Ethan.
All right. So one thing that I believe is a common misconception about vulnerability that prevent men from expressing their true feelings is that they are going to be a burden on somebody else. And I think that is one of the biggest misconceptions out there. Most men, not most men, there is usually if you're a decent dude, there's usually somebody that you can go and talk to. I think part of the problem is not everybody has really found that person that they can be vulnerable with, you know. But a lot of times, you know, we think that we are a burden on somebody, especially when it comes to other men. Like we already understand that there are certain things that we're not going to tell our lady or our kids. Why? Because just like when I was talked about earlier, you don't need to share everything. You know, everything that's going bad in my life, I can't be bringing all of that negative energy into the home. You know what I mean? So I need to call Coach or Gaddy or Roland and be like, look, brother, this was going on. So any man that's out there that's watching this right now, look, reach out, get you a wolf pack, get you some homeboys or something like that. And I guarantee you, you will not be a burden to me or any of these dudes on this panel when you got something going on in your life and you want to speak it. And there are a lot of dudes out there that are itching with an ear to listen to something that you got going on because they've been through it and they don't want to see you go through it. So again, like I said, it is a huge misconception that think that we are a burden on somebody else for wanting to be vulnerable and share some things that go on in our life. So that's my stuff. You up, Coach?
Oh, I thought it was good. My bad, man. I'm sorry.
Eddie went first.
I'm over here doing what I do, man. I apologize.
Oh no, he went second.
I would say, you know, when it comes down to some common misconceptions about vulnerability that prevent men from expressing their true feelings, that minds need to look like yours. I think that's one of the biggest ones. And because you feel that minds need to look like yours, you would tell me that I do not express myself, that I'm very reserved, whatever that looks like. And I think more so the problem is that you believe that everything is a blanket statement when it comes down to it. Just because you do it a particular type of way does not necessarily mean that mine's is supposed to look your way. But then when we're not necessarily talking about this, when it comes down to a way of doing things around the house, dealing with the kids, whatever the case may be, you would tell me that. You would tell me that the way that you handle the kids ain't the way that I handle the kids. You would tell me that the way that you take care of the house ain't the way that I would take care of the house. So what baffles me is that on the other hand, when it comes down to being vulnerable, expressing ourselves, whatever the case may be, you 100% believe that it must line up with the way that you would do it. And if I don't do it the way that you do it, then that means that I'm not doing it. And that is the furthest thing from the truth. Men express themselves, they just express themselves differently. So that being said, we got one more question. And this is all about role models and community leaders, the value of mature Black men. So, gentlemen, the last question for the evening. In what ways can mature Black men who embrace and promote open dialogue lead to transformative changes within their community? And what specific examples highlight? No, I think that's the wrong question. It should be what challenges. There we go. What challenges do mature Black men face when attempting to promote open and honest dialogue within their communities? He was looking at me like, whoa.
I think one of the challenges. Oh, go ahead.
I think one of the challenges is that you're not qualified. I think a lot of times we have people in our community who are experts or who are who have leveled up in their professions and in their fields, but for some reason, people won't give them a chance. You know what I'm saying? Um, they have reached certain levels. I also think another challenge that people face is that I think sometimes you kind of get ostracized or criticized for moving away. You know what I mean? When you kind of grow up and you become mature and you learn some things, and you may have some resources, and you decide to move to a nicer neighborhood to better protect your family and stuff like this. I think sometimes they feel like, well, since you've moved away, you can't speak on what goes on in the community over here. And I don't think that that's fair. I think that what the way we could switch that is that, hey, if you work hard or if you do X, Y, and Z, you can raise your children in a place where they don't have to deal with certain things. So I just think that's one of the things that can be a challenge, is, like I said, especially when you move away and then you want to come back and help, it's not always welcomed.
And I think one of the things, I think we deal with what we feel more than the facts of the matter. And when you deal with what you feel, it's only about you. It's only about how you look at the situation. You can't take into account how somebody else may take this information and dissect it, because it's about, well, I felt you did this and I felt you did this. Instead of saying, like Coach said, no, you dissect the thing. And now when you got pieces, now we can communicate, because I didn't really mean it that way. I meant it like this. And now we can talk about that. And that may just squash the whole thing and bring it down. Because once I start talking about feelings, personally, I'm saying I don't give a cuss about your feelings. We're not talking about how you feel about it. We're talking about this. If we stick to the topic at hand, then we can get somewhere. But if we're going to talk about your feelings all day, we might as well not even talk, because I'm going to turn on ESPN.
Whew, man, there's so many ways I want to go with this question, but I'm like, I don't know which way. Ah, y'all help me a little bit, because y'all hit some of the points I was thinking. But I'm gonna say, and I'm saying this to be funny and not to be funny at the same time. But Dr. Umar Johnson, right? To me, uh, and here's why I say that, because he's the only brother speaking in the community for the community, whether we agree with him or not. He's the one touring and making his voice heard, showing up on these platforms, right? Uh, there, there are not a lot of men in our community as community leaders today, right? Our Black Lives Matter for women leading that. All these and there's nothing against women, but when we talk about mature black, what are some of the challenges we face? Is that our community is not used to hearing black men open their mouth and speak for the community as leaders. And so we face the challenge of just being heard, even though we're loud. Everything that we say, unfortunately, is not being heard to be understood, is being heard to be picked apart. Who's this N-word? Where'd he come from? Who hit that? What makes him qualified? And we start throwing salt on each other. So when I say Dr. Umar, I'm saying he's the only voice. He's one. And everybody else, I mean, you got a bunch of brothers who got podcasts, but half the stuff that these jokers are saying is clickbait. They're talking about stuff that get the clicks, not stuff that make changes, not stuff that affect our community. And so when we say we need more black men to be in our community and to lead in our community, but we need to actually, just like we do with everyone else, we need to listen to understand what the men that are out there are already saying. Because there are men that are ready to speak, but I think there's a lot of men who don't believe that they will be heard. So they stay silent and they don't speak. So we just have to do better at supporting one as at supporting one another and not trying to compete with one another.
Yeah, no, I love that. For one, I'm not promoting Dr. Umar Johnson. I'm just going to be honest. Not that I don't like him or anything like that. I think the brother has some good talking points. I just don't agree with everything you say. It is what it is. But that's probably a lot of people that I listen to as well. I don't agree with everything they say either. So, you know, it is what it is. I think the challenges that mature Black men face when attempting to promote open and honest communication within their community starts with conflicting perspectives. That's why I started off responding to that one, right? Because on one hand, you will hear a person talk about the community needs to be together, but then they will also have another conversation to where it goes totally against what we're talking about right now. And it's like, but wait, how did that go hand in hand? How the community needs to come together, but then you're saying that it's your fault that this person, no, there's no, listen, let me say it like this. I'm going to be as straightforward, open, and honest as I possibly can with what I'm going to say. And this is not an attack on anybody because I don't know your history, your background, or anything. It is absolutely nobody else's fault when it comes down to anything that has happened in your life. Now, am I saying that somebody at some point in time did not do a thing to you? That's not what I'm saying. But the outcome is what I'm talking about. So I can't be holding on to something that happened to me back in, this is 2024, 2014, and still talking about it in 2024, saying that because of what happened to me in 2014, this is why I am here where I am. No, at some point, responsibility has to kick in my life. And so when you look at a lot of these conflicting notions, a lot of these conflicting perspectives, because this day and age, everybody got a microphone. And since everybody got a microphone, they feel that they need to be heard, right? Freedom of speech does not give everybody the freedom to speak. Okay, that's one of the first things that we need to process. Just because you got something to say, you may not necessarily need to say it. You might want to process it and analyze it. It's a big difference between information and knowledge. And in this day and age, most of us are stuck in the acquisition of information, right? Know the difference between information and knowledge. If there's nothing that is resulting in your life based upon the information that you are obtaining, then it's just information and it's not doing you or anybody else any good. So get to the point to where the information turns itself into knowledge. And now, once it turns itself into knowledge, now you can get to the point to where you can see the difference that is happening in your life based upon the information that you acquire. That's where I will start off at. The other side to it is that we struggle. I'm going to say it, and I'm going to take a dramatic pause. We struggle when it comes down to understanding the difference between reality and fiction. Reality and fiction. This is why I stress the notion. What are the facts, right? What relevant data leads you to this assessment? I think one of the gentlemen just said, I think it was Roland. Roland said, you start a conversation off with, I feel. Thank you. Now, what are the facts that support how you feel? It's not that I don't care about how you feel, but you don't get to project how you feel on me and expect me to move. What are the facts that support how you feel? If you can give me the facts to support how you feel, now we can have a conversation about that. But at the end of the day, because let's just be honest, I can feel that this microphone is terrible, but you guys may be listening to, man, that microphone sounds good. Now I feel that it's not good. Well, what evidence do you have to support that, I'm saying, it's not good? So I can make it up en route. And in me making it up, if the world has set the conditions to where you should move, because I say the word I feel, now I am using the term I feel to manipulate. That's where we're at. So when you have mature Black men who are really trying to help the community, I feel like they're just trying to be misogynistic. What's the evidence to support that? At what point in this conversation, I'm just using this conversation for an example, at what point in this conversation did we say women are beneath men? Did we give the notion that we didn't? So if we're having a conversation about men, then you have to understand that the notion is that we're trying to build our community up. But I feel becomes the narrative, and therefore that becomes a problem. So that's the two things I'm going to go with. because we have another question in the chat that I want you guys to answer. Hey, why do I feel like Hulk Hogan right now?
I know. I was like, I found a simple way to approach it for me. Ego tears down, masculinity builds up.
Well,
right. And I'm saying that in the sense of, when I build, if I can build a house, I build a house so I can say, look what I did. Look what I did. And I tore down everybody. By doing that, you tear down everybody that built it with you. All right. But my masculinity says I could build a house. And so I'm going to build a house. And I'm going to build houses for my community so that we have shelter. You know what I'm saying? Because, and I know that it sounds like it's a fine line because we have turned the word masculinity into a trigger word nowadays. But the things that men do in the community, the things that men do in the home, right, is masculinity. It's a masculine trait, right? Even when we talk about provide and protect, is a masculine trait. There are, like brought up, there's single mothers that do it, but that have to do it because they're single, but that's out of necessity. And even then, there's a struggle in doing it, right? But the ego, it tears down. By artificially raising myself up above everyone else, I'm making everybody else insignificant. That's how I look at it.
Ego focuses on self, and that's why when you say I feel, it's from ego. Masculinity is a trait that's attributed to males, but attributed to moving forward and building. It's not the tearing down and, oh, I'm beating my chest, I'm lifting weights. No, it's you're building something. It's you're actually moving forward. So it's not that's why you can't have toxic building, toxic elevating. No, there's no such thing. That's why it's an oxymoron. You cannot have it. So when you have ego, I can say, well, you're being, I think you're being, this is toxic masculinity because you're trying to do this because of how you feel about the situation, not about how I am, because I can keep my voice at a calm rate or whatever, but because I say what you don't like, now I'm toxic. Now it's toxic masculinity because I identify as a man. Now anything I say is deemed as toxic masculinity because you disagree with it and it goes against your principles and your guidelines. So and ego has to do with the psyche, and masculinity is just a trait.
Yeah, I was kind of going with the same thing, like what Roland just kind of finished up with. The ego is more about, it's more about like your self-concept, like your self-worth, different things like that. Focus on the individual. And I think when it comes to like masculinity, that's kind of deals with more with like gender roles, sometimes behavior, more so different things like that. So I'm looking at the time, so I'll keep it short. I'll keep it at that.
Yeah, I'm agreeing with everybody here. Ego is all about the individual person. Masculinity, believe it or not, is both in male and female. So there's a unity that involves that is connected when it comes down to masculinity, just like femininity is in both male and female. So it's not about one particular person. It's about the coming together of both people. So that's why I will go with that. Great question. Thank you guys for all of your comments again. As always, unfortunately, we got to come close to the end, and that brings us to our bittersweet moment.
Why the strong silent type is a lie, part 2. I think in the past 2 weeks, we've had discussions and questions that brought out a lot of people's feelings and perceptions. But the fact remains that if I am a strong person, that means I communicate. That means that if I have a vision, I can't just hold on to the vision for myself. I have to communicate it and make it known and make it plain. So me being strong and showing strength does not mean that I hold things in and take it on the chin, but it rather means that because I am strong, I know when to speak. I know when to hold my tongue. I know when to do these things because of my learning ability, because I have learned how to communicate with certain people, and I listen more than I talk. So just because I'm not speaking every time you're trying to say something, that's somebody that's trying to win an argument. But the strong silent type, as the world sees it, is a misconception because it puts you in a box and doesn't allow you to be who you truly are. Because once it doesn't fit that box narrative, then it goes against that. And now I have to go into how I feel you're acting, how I feel you're looking, how I feel you're treating me, instead of how you're actually treating me, instead of what you actually say versus what you didn't say. And sometimes I'm waiting on trigger words to make known to how I feel so that I can address that. And when you don't say that, or when I don't say that, now you didn't get what you wanted. So the conversation is an argument in itself versus a building relationship and a communicating of two adults.
The strong silent type is multi-layered, as you have seen over the last 2 weeks. With that being said, there's more than one way, and just like Roland said, there's more than one way to look at this. Being strong isn't always necessarily just holding things in. Sometimes being strong is being vulnerable. Sometimes being strong is expressing yourself to someone that is going to give you the feedback that you need, not necessarily what you want. I spoke earlier about the wolf pack. I'm a firm believer in the wolf pack mentality, whether you are a male or whether you're a female. I think that it's always good to have somebody or a group of people that you can share things with. Holding things in and being silent about things that are very important in your life is not behavior that you want to continue for your entire life. And if by chance you don't find that person in a wolf pack or a grandma or nana or somebody like that, reach out to a therapist or a coach or a counselor or something like that. Holding things in is the worst thing you can do. Just speaking from personal experience, that was me as a child. I held things in and then I eventually exploded, and that's never a good thing, especially as we grow up and we transition from boyhood to men. We need that outlet. So men or women, if you listen to this, make sure or spend some time trying to build your wolf pack, to have an outlet so you don't have to remain silent. And if you're in a relationship with somebody and you can't be vulnerable, you can't be open, and you have to be silent, or vice versa, then try to have a conversation to see about going to get you guys some help and some support.
To everything there's a season, and that's also in that passage of scripture. It talks about a time to speak and a time to be silent. And so for men, it's important that we understand the time to speak and the time to be silent, right? We should take out the feelings narrative, right? And what I mean by that is what Roland talked about. When I think we live in a time to where we have weaponized emotions to the point to where I feel a certain way, so you have to adjust how you speak, how you think, and how you live because of my feelings. let's take that aspect out of it. There is just an appropriate time to speak, and there's appropriate time not to speak. And we have to understand the difference, right? I think even women have to understand the difference, right? But we're talking from the silent male type, right? But when we do so, we have to make sure that we know that we understand that we are responsible for what we're saying. When I speak and I want to express myself, that doesn't mean I get to hit below the belt. I get to demean the other. I get to talk down. It just means I get to express myself in a way that I can get a proper result. I used to say get a desired result, but I think sometimes when we talk about our desired results, we start walking on the lines of manipulation. And so we have to be responsible for what we say and how we say it, so that we can get the proper results, so that we can come together, we can grow together. And I think that we're both responsible for creating these safe spaces so that our emotions and our opinions can express itself and can bloom and we can grow. That's all I have.
For the sake of time, I don't have a last comment. I'm just going to keep pressing. What we said is what we said. I think it was to the value of the community, and it wasn't against anyone or to their detriment. That being said, we want to thank you from the bottom of our hearts for listening to the entirety of this message, not just this week, but last week as well, because I think we unpacked and uncovered a lot of things. And I hope that we got after most of the comments that you guys placed in the beginning when we asked the question. But by all means, if not, ask in the chat on this note on this particular video afterwards, and we will do our best to respond. I always try to respond to comments, so that's just one of my things I do personally. So that being said, thank you guys. We appreciate you. Have a great rest of your evening. Have a phenomenal weekend, and let the best version of yourself be a blessing to somebody else.